Good morning, subscribers. Well, if you just watched my previous video on the Macroeconomic Paper for Year 1 A-Level Economics, then welcome to the second, which is for the Microeconomics Paper. So in the same way as I have done for the macro paper, I'm going to have a look back through the micro, macro and specimen, and then we'll consider ways in which, or certainly topic areas, which might be more likely than others to appear this year. Now, as I said in the previous video, if you wish to contact me, then you can get in touch via geekonomics.co.uk/contact, Twitter, so that's at @G_Conomics, Instagram, G_Conomics as well, and I'll do my utmost to get back to you at this very important time for you in terms of your academic careers. So let's get a look at these previous papers and then consider 2018. I'll put this on a link somewhere down below, probably to Twitter or something like that, where you can pick it up and have a good study of it. But let's have a look at the case studies that we've seen so far. So 2016 was about minimum alcohol pricing. 2017 was about road passenger transport and the whole notion of derived demand. And then the third one was, this was from the specimen paper, this is on changing patterns of food production and consumption. So those have been the general case study areas. I would say it's a little bit more difficult to place and predict the case study for the micro than the macro, certainly, because there's a much broader range to pick from, I would say. But I'll talk about that when we get to this 2018 section. So key themes in the past, ladies and gents. PED, price elasticity of demand, negative externalities, and minimum pricing, obviously to do with the Scottish policy which just came into effect the other week. Then in 2017, as I mentioned, derived demand, but then also looking at not just price elasticity of demand and also income elasticity of demand. Now, ladies and gents, the key thing for these elasticity measures is don't just know how to do the calculation. So, know the maths of it, obviously, but make sure that you can interpret it and explain what the number means. So if PED is -5, make sure you know what that means. If it's income elastic, so +2, make sure that you can explain what that means. Know the difference between all the elasticity measures. As with all of these, there's been a little bit of demand and supply analysis, fairly straightforward stuff. And then with an extended question here on regulation. So min pricing, regulation. Now the last one here, demand and supply analysis again, YED, PED. Then we had PED and how taxes could be used to correct a market failure. So the market failure in question, I think, was pollution. So this whole notion of negative externalities. Okay, so that's the key themes. And then the essays, we've had subsidies with regard to market failures. And then this was a bit of an odd one, this other one. It was about economies of scale and location theory, a bit more businessy, I thought, rather than economics. Then we had centrally planned to free market economy, pros and cons type, taxation to correct market failure, state provision of education, buffer stocks, and then that leaves us with, well, where do we go from here? So where do we go from here, ladies and gents? So it's the, be a very rich man if I could predict what the questions will be every time. But here we go. Micro. Case study, difficult. I'm going to vouch for clean energy here. Something on clean energy. And just the whole notion of the negative externality effects of pollution, and obviously then the positive externality effects from solar power and all that sort of thing, and hydroelectric. So that's what I'm going to plumb for. We'll see how that comes about. But in terms of themes, I think there are a few gaps which haven't been covered in the specification. So certainly, as ever, expect something on externalities. Expect demand and supply diagrams and analysis. But cross-price elasticity of demand has not been featured, so that's something to look out for, as well as knowing the others, obviously. And then the whole notion of economies of scale and diseconomies of scale, that hasn't been on either. So that's something to bear in mind. And that then takes us, ladies and gentlemen, to the essays. Now I want to just show you the specification for a moment, if I may. So this is the year 1 spec, and I've zoomed in here to the page on market failure and government intervention. Now in all bar one of the previous essays, which was that strange one about location theory really, they've all focused on this area of the spec, the market failure spec. And that's really interesting because if you look back at the previous legacy specification, that's where all the essays came from as well. So it's more than likely that you're going to get an essay on some aspect of market failure. Now of course you're saying to me, well, what aspect? Well, let's have a look here and see what aspects have already been considered. So if I flick here, we can see the various methods of intervention. So we've already seen an essay on tax, on subsidy, on state provision, on buffer stocks. We had a shorter answer question on price controls with regard to minimum alcohol pricing. But that then leaves us with these areas at the bottom: legislation, regulation, and information provision. So if I were you, certainly those are areas that I would be genning up for in your preparation for this micro paper on Monday. One other thing to say on that is if you want to see examples of questions from this particular area of the spec, go to the OCR website, go to the previous specification, just pick any exam series, doesn't matter which, and go to the 581 papers, and they are the micro papers from the old spec. And in there you will find a wealth of questions on market failure. And if you trawl through those in the mark schemes, you'll find the ones on those particular areas which I've pointed out. So, ladies and gentlemen, back to this document again. That's why I've said these particular areas here, excuse me. I'll put a link to this below, probably to Twitter as I mentioned. And as ever, any questions, I'll do my very best to get back to you at this very important and busy time for you in your revision. Bye for now.